Hello and welcome to episode 105 of the Mo Money Podcast. I am your host, Jessica Morehouse. Thanks for joining me for another episode 105. I can't believe we're already here. And a few episodes to go before I wrap up this season and take my little summer break. But before I do that, I still have quite a few episodes to share, including this one where I interview Kerry Taylor, a very well-known personal finance personality here in Canada. You can find out more about her on her blog, Squawkfox.com, which of course I will link to in the show notes, jessicamorales.com/105. We talk a ton about her journey into personal finance, what got her interested in, learning more about money and writing about it to share her expertise with everybody, but also the secondhand economy. She's kind of an expert when it comes to, figuring out how to make money by selling stuff that you have in your closet, but also not just buying stuff that's new, buying stuff that's secondhand. What a concept. Things are becoming a little bit more, kind of normal. Lots of people do that, getting on Craigslist and Kijiji and Buns and all these crazy things. So we chat all about how she does it to save money and kind of some tips along the way that she would like to share with you. And before I get to that episode, thank you so much to Wealthsimple for deciding to support this episode of the podcast. Thanks so much. Wealthsimple, if you don't know, is the fastest growing automated investing service in Canada. Wealthsimple uses smart technology to help you create and manage a diversified investment portfolio, saving you time and money. And if you go to wealthsimple.com/Jessica Morehouse, readers and listeners, if you want to get your investments on, I highly recommend Wealthsimple. Love them, long time. You can go to wealthsimple.com/Jessica Morehouse, and your first $10,000 of investments will have no management fees for 1 year. And you'll want to take advantage of this offer before it goes away. So you have until April 30th to take advantage of this special offer. So make sure to go to wealthsimple.com/Jessica Morehouse if you're, trying to figure out how to invest your money. Wealthsimple is one of the ways you can do it. All right, enough yabbering. Let's get to that interview. Thanks, Kerry, for joining me on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks, Jessica.
You are welcome. So I'm excited to chat with you because I think you are one of the oldest, and not by age, I mean oldest bloggers in that you started your blog back in 2008, which is a while ago. You're a veteran blogger of the personal finance sphere.
I know, but when I look at it, I don't see it that way because there were so many people before me.
Yes.
So when I think of the veterans, I think of people like the Canadian Capitalist. He was one of the first bloggers I would read, or a blog that used to be called Four Pillars. That was another blog that I would follow. And it was usually just guys.
Yeah.
And
were you one of the first kind of women bloggers? I feel like in my experience, when I started getting into the personal finance blogs, you were one of the few female bloggers at the time.
I don't know. I think maybe I was one of the first to use storytelling and use my personal stories. And I talked about, girl stuff. I talked about, stuff that guys don't talk about, menstruation, the cost of periods. I went there, right?
Yes, and someone needs to.
Yeah, and I didn't just talk about investing in ETFs and index funds and, calculating your management expense ratio. That stuff got me going too, but it's kind of what? There are costs everywhere.
Yeah.
Personal finance is more than just investing. Personal finance is how much you pay for your rent, or how quickly you pay down your debt, or your groceries, or how much you're spending on clothing. Everything that touches money to me became my personal finance. So whenever I saw an expense that was a repeatable expense and it seemed like an unsustainable way to live, I would look for ways to cut that cost.
Yeah.
So
I know
I became really, really keyed into looking at the kind of stuff that I would buy and then have to throw out. To me, that was really poor personal finance planning, because it's all these products that are designed for the trash can. And I was well, that's my money.
Exactly.
So I started looking at it from that perspective. And I just sharing those stories of the kind of adventures I would go in, creating less garbage and buying less stuff, and how that impacted my wellness or, my bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked for alternatives too. So there was an expensive product in the market. I would try to make it for less.
Yes.
So that was my kind of brand. And that was like what I was playing with. And it was fun and it was different. So if women connected with me, that's cool. If guys connected with me, that was cool. And I just kind of kept going because it was fun.
I know. Well, I know one of the kind of blog posts there's two blog posts that I associate with you because they were very popular when they came out and they were very impactful when I remember reading them. And one of them was just like the simple one where you were comparing a Starbucks drink with one that you made and you were able to get the price down crazy and it looks exactly the same. So that's kind of what you're kind of talking about is like, oh, wow, this is kind of maybe something people buy on the daily and they didn't realize if they can make it on their own, they could be saving like 80% or whatever. And the second would be your wedding, which cost like $300, which is mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Starbucks coffee frappuccino thing. I was like, I think it was called like how to make a Starbucks frappuccino for like 37 cents.
Yeah.
And I basically, I was living in rural Canada and I drove my little smart car to a Starbucks because I wanted a treat. And I couldn't believe that these things cost $4. Now they're more, but
I know now I think they're like 6 or who knows what, but yeah.
Well, and I asked the barista, I'm like, what the heck is in this thing? So she pulled out the ingredient list and I'm like, well, heck, I can make that at home. So I bought one and then she gave me an extra cup and I'm like busting home in my smart car before this thing melts. And I break out like all my ingredients and I just start making one. And my kitchen was a disaster because I really kind of made the first few that were awful, but it took me a while to figure out how to make it delicious. And I just started photographing it. And that darn post was so viral.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Yeah.
It was, I couldn't believe, like I was huge in Japan for a while and I was like, wow. But, and it was cool because, it just brought in so many different eyeballs and it was fun because I'd never had a post that had like 250,000 views in less than 24 hours. It was like, holy crap. And then Lifehacker picked it up and then it just went huge. So that was fun. But the wedding one, that was completely another organic thing. I just thought, I live on a farm. I'm just going to buy a secondhand wedding dress. I don't have enough space at the kitchen table to invite a whole bunch of people. And I just, Carl and I my husband now just thought, we don't need a big wedding. We've been together for 10 years. It's, the gig is up. And we just kind of kept small, right? We didn't need anything. We didn't need bridal showers or, anything of that sort. So I just kind of went to Costco, bought flowers. I mean, I can't understand why people spend thousands and thousands on flowers. I'm like, okay, I'll just get what's in season.
I know.
Bought a secondhand dress. My friends took pictures, so we had little cameras that they could use. They took videos of us, and it was really kind of fun. We did all the setup and takedown ourselves. We just used the kitchen chairs and moved them from outside and moved them inside. And we barbecued a salmon. Like I don't know, it's the way you do it on the farm, I guess.
Yeah.
And you just have people drop in and hang out. And there were no gifts, so people didn't feel obligated. And people brought bottles of wine and it was really fun because there was no stress, no mess. And our biggest expenses were really the wedding license and paying for the commissioner to come out. So I think in all it was about $500.
Yeah.
And though my wedding dress was a silk secondhand gown I bought on eBay and it costs about $100.
Nice.
And I put pictures of it online and showed people how I made my bouquet. And I thought, you know what? Like, I don't understand why people feel they need to spend $35,000, $40,000 on this one day.
Yeah.
Because instead, Carl and I went on a really awesome trip. And, you don't need a bubble machine to get hitched is what I'm saying. All you need is a wedding license and a commissioner. And after you have those two things, the bubble machine doesn't matter. That's all you need to get married. So it just seemed everything beyond the certificate and the commissioner just seemed like too much.
Yeah.
So, we're still married and we bought a house and paid for it in full and life goes on.
Yeah. No, yeah, clearly no regrets from the frugal wedding. And from the people that I have, I mean, I've never encountered someone who's like, I wish I spent more on my wedding. It's like, no, everyone's like, damn, I wish I spent less.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most people are regretful of spending that much, especially if they get dehitched or
Yes.
decoupled or divorced or separated, right? They're like, man, I wish I had that money. But I've never regretted spending so little. And I've actually had a number of people leave really dreadful comments because they're like, you used Facebook to invite your friends to your wedding? And I'm like, well, yeah, they're all kind of nearby and local. It didn't seem like a big deal. We're all on Facebook anyways. It's not like my invite went viral or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares?
People drove up to the farm and,
Yeah.
like it was pretty cash and it was fun because people just kind of let loose. We had croquet and I don't know, we just hung out on the farm. It was beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like lots of
no
people...
one ever regrets underspending.
No, exactly. I've, I tried to be as frugal as can be for my wedding, but I still spent $15,000. And that's like, even thinking of that number, I'm like, that is so much money for one day that went by in a flash, one day where it's like, I didn't even have time to have a bite of the wedding cake because it was just so busy and crazy.
Oh, so, really? Oh,
no. I know. I'm still bitter, I think.
But your major expenses though, right? Your major expenses are probably food.
It was food and booze in the venue. Yeah. That's what did it. So it's like, had we, and we had 75 people. And it's, the more people you have, the more expensive it's going to get. So basically everyone I encounter that they're thinking of getting married or they got engaged, I'm like, elope or do something very small because you will, and then just, like go on an awesome honeymoon or trip after, or put that towards a house or, your first place together. I mean, so many better ways.
I think I made a comment that the more like the cost of the wedding itself is really, the more people you invite, the more expensive it's going to be because all of a sudden then you need like a bigger venue and more food. And then for some reason, women need a bigger dress. So like the bigger the venue, the bigger, the more people, it's like, oh my gosh, I need like a bigger, showier dress. So I always say, if you can limit the guest list, you're laughing.
I know. Absolutely. I think that's key.
The people who want to come won't be laughing.
Yeah.
But, I dealt with some really sad family members and I'm like, hey man, you've met Carl, you've met me. We live in rural BC. You'd have to fly, 10 hours to get here. So it's like, why don't you just come visit and there'll be no pomp and circumstance. It'll be fun.
Exactly.
We'll take you on a hayride. It'll be all good.
Yeah. So one thing I'd love to pick your brain on.
Wedding and frappuccinos.
Yes. Wedding and frappuccinos. But you mentioned hayrides. So you lived in rural BC. And now you live in, the hustle and bustle of Toronto. What is that like? And why, what made that change for you that's a big lifestyle change. What's it like? And do you like Toronto?
Well, I'm from Toronto.
Oh, are you? I thought you were always from Vancouver.
I know. No, I know. I move around. See, home is wherever I rest my head. But no, I lived in I was born in Toronto, lived in Toronto, raised in Toronto, moved to Ottawa to go to school, and then I got really bored. I wanted to go back to school, but in British Columbia. So I studied computer science in British Columbia and met a boy who I really liked. And it was his fault that I moved from Vancouver to rural BC because I liked him.
Yeah.
So I followed him home. And that was Carl. So he was raised on a farm, a cattle ranch. And we thought, the price of real estate in Vancouver was going absolutely bonkers. It boggled my brain that it would have to cost, $750,000 for a fixer-upper. It's even more now.
I know, it's insane.
But we did the math, and with our computer science backgrounds, we realized we could make something work in rural BC, put our brains together and eke out an income. And we bought a house, with our savings, because we were so diligent and careful with our money when we lived in Vancouver. We rented a garden level suite. We didn't really, we didn't have automobiles. We rode our bikes everywhere, took the bus. And I don't know, we didn't really have anything expensive we wanted or needed. We just, took our city savings and, put it aside. And with that, we bought a house straight out in rural British Columbia. And we still own the house now. but ultimately what happened was, we became parents, and I just felt the need to move back to Toronto. I miss, as you said, the hustle and bustle of the city. And I'd been in rural BC for close to 10 years. So with my blogging business, I was constantly asked to do media stuff. And I'd always have to turn it down because, well, we didn't have high-speed internet. And because in rural BC, you just don't have it. And, I thought, this is, something I'd like to try and something I'd like to do. And my husband, being a computer scientist, it's easy to get a city job in tech. So it was really easy for him to land work. So we just packed up the kid and moved east and rent. We're basically homeowners who rent. So we kept our house and we just moved to Toronto and we rent, a little semi, and life goes on. But it was kind of a culture shock at first because I wasn't used to being around so many people. I was used to being like, okay, there's a bear today, better not cross the street. Someone left the fence open, all the cattle got out. Okay, let's round them up. Better be careful, cougar sighting in the area. That was the kind of stuff I would come across. The day I woke up and had a moose in the backyard, that was really eye-opening because it felt like I was in prehistoric Canada. Because if you've ever seen a moose in person, they're big, right? Strange-looking beasts.
Yeah,
they're huge.
And
with this long head, and they look out of place. They look like a prehistoric beast. So at that moment, I said to Carl, I said, you know what? Like, the bears knocked over the freezer outside. I have a moose out back. I have bears in the front. I got a cougar on the patio. I think it's Toronto time. I think
this is a sign we need to go.
I need people. I think I've hit all the wildlife I need to see now. I think it's time for Toronto. That was really strange. And what else really hit me was all the stores. Even though I'm from the city, there wasn't as many storefronts and big city malls as there are now. It seems like every corner you turn, there's another strip mall or another big box discount store, or a luxury mall, or what do you call those, outlets? Outlet shopping is so big now. I was like, the heck is outlet? It's a place you drive there, you go in, you buy crazy stuff, you leave. It just, I was like, wow, no bears here. But I think that was the biggest shock. And the first month I came back, I basically, I went to the Eaton Center and just walked around, and I'm like, wow, I wasn't used to seeing so many stores because for me to go shopping, I had to drive an hour and a half to get to the nearest mall. And you had to really want to shop to drive that distance. So, and generally we would only drive that distance and go into town if we needed, kids supplies or groceries. So I think that was really an eye-opening change for me. And I just couldn't believe how much stuff there was.
Yeah. So much stuff in demand to take your money, basically.
Yeah. And ads everywhere. And I wasn't attuned to that anymore because that noise doesn't exist in rural BC. So getting accustomed to that kind of visual noise, it took a little bit out of me because it was just, even though I'm from here, I still wasn't used to it. So I think that was really eye-opening. And I think I spent a couple days just watching people shop, which sounds really strange. If you write about consumer stuff, it's fascinating because it's kind of like Animal Planet. Like you watch people around like the expensive purse section in like I don't know, Saxford Avenue, and you see them. They hunt and look at purses, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of time devoted to like a piece of leather.
I know,
but that's what they love. So but it was just fascinating for me to watch it because I've never seen that before. But so that from a kind of a farm to city perspective, that was a shock. But I mean, moving from the city like Vancouver to a farm, that was shocking too, because it was so quiet. And it was a real adjustment not having things at your fingertips. Like I couldn't just go and grab a coffee. If you didn't have coffee in your house, there was no coffee. You'd have to drive and get it. So it was a lot of planning and really careful grocery shopping you had to do before you left the house and went to town so that you didn't forget anything. So it was a really, things weren't convenient anymore.
Yeah.
So living without convenience became okay.
Yeah.
It was okay that everything wasn't there. You just kind of learned to make do with, having no milk today or not enough laundry detergent. Oh, well, going into town next week, put it on the list, laundry will have to wait another day, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it sounds like a nice, simpler life. Do you ever kind of miss it compared to now living in the city? Because when you kind of describe that, that sounds kind of like heaven. Like even the going without of some things, like that sounds kind of nice.
Well, it's different though. I mean, it's so quiet. You don't have the buzz of the city, and it's so dark because there's no street lights. So you have a lot of stars that you can see, and it sounds really great. You go for a walk and it's like, oh, there's the bear, like it's touch and go. Like it's a different kind of lifestyle. I only wore like jeans and plaid shirts and shorts and stuff when I lived out there. So when I came back to Toronto, I all of a sudden needed clothing, which was a real shock to my system because I hadn't bought like work clothing in like 10 years. So it's like, oh my gosh, I go into like a Banana Republic and I'm like, I can't believe a dress costs $300 to $400.
I know.
And that's like the regular price. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is a cotton dress. So that was a shock to my system.
But it seems like, because you do have a really good style, it seems like you've kind of figured out a way to keep up with city style, but you've embraced kind of the secondhand economy, which I think is really awesome. And it's also becoming a lot more popular because people are realizing, oh, this makes sense. Why do I have to buy everything new? Because whenever I see you, I'm always in awe of like your outfit. I was like, how did you get that? That looks really nice.
Well, this is the thing. So I had to start from scratch because all I had were jeans and t-shirts, which were fine. And I actually, when I did TV and stuff, I would just wear jeans and put a blazer over top. But eventually it was just like, I think I'd like a couple dresses. So in the city, I started noticing all these consignment stores. Are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, good. There you are. Okay.
I'm here.
I was like, I'm going to lose you on the secondhand economy. Because people usually, when I do a speech and I say everything I'm wearing is used, people always sound so shocked. They look at me with these big eyes like, are you kidding me? Everything you're wearing is secondhand? I'm like, yeah. And it was something I really discovered when my daughter was little because I couldn't believe how much kids' clothing cost. It would be like, if you go into Baby Gap, it would be like $37 for a pair of baby jeans.
Wow.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So I would start venturing in thrift stores like Value Village or Goodwill or any of the local kids stores that were geared towards secondhand kids gear. And I would just stock up because it was a savings of at least 80% on the garments. A lot of them still had tags on them. And even if they had a stain or two, I knew my kid was going to destroy it anyway, so it didn't matter. We bought our stroller secondhand. It cost $250 for your basic Bob stroller. Has the big wheels. It went over cattle guards really easy. And in the city, you look like a bit of a bad arse with it. And I sold it for $250.
Nice.
So it was a wash, really. I basically had, access to a stroller for 3 years until my kid didn't need it anymore. So when you have a kid, it became a really good entry point for me to really venture into the secondhand economy with clothing and then kids' toys like bicycles, cribs. As long as you check for recalls, you're fine. And it just became a really thrifty way to spend the right amount of money I felt comfortable with, kidding out my kid for less. And I mean, she didn't care that she was wearing secondhand pants.
Yeah, of course not.
She was just happy that they were pink, right? And snowsuits. I mean, if you've ever gone to a store and see the price of a snowsuit, it's shocking. So like, I know it's like some stores sell them for $75, $80 for a friggin' snowsuit.
And they'll wear it 1 year,
because
right?
the kid can only wear them.
Yeah.
If even that, right? Sometimes depending on your kid's growth spurt, it'll grow out of the kid will grow out of the snowsuit mid-season.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I've had parents struggling to find a second snowsuit or a second pair of boots. Or the kid loses something. I mean, kids lose stuff. I don't know how my kid once came home with one boot, but she did. And I had to go through, I know, I'm like, you're costing me a fortune. I had to go through the kid's lost found to find her boot. So it's these sort of things that make it really easy just to go secondhand, because you know they're going to wear it a short time. If they destroy it, it's not so bad. And then you can resell it on the secondhand economy as well. So basically, after kitting out my kid in secondhand clothing, I thought, well, what's good for my kid is good for me. So I love shopping the secondhand economy for her so much that I shop there myself. And I discovered in the city all these really high-end consignment stores for women. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is really high-end stuff. Like labels were like made in like Italy and France with names like Dolce and Gabbana and, you know, like all the high-end stuff. And the fabric, like I would touch the fabric and I'm like, well, this feels better than a mall dress.
Yeah.
And it was the same price. It was $300.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why don't I just buy the secondhand dress made of wool and silk rather than spending on the cotton dress that doesn't feel as nice against my skin? And the thing is, a lot of these higher end garments, they're cut better. So they look better on you. And I think that's the secret. When you buy something that has good fabrication and good construction, it just looks better on the body.
It does.
So I guess that's why I look kitted out, because it's like, it's the dress.
So
you know,
I feel like I need
me.
I love that. Because honestly, I didn't know that I really had no concept of these kind of designer consignment stores. I didn't know that even existed because I didn't know anyone else that did it until I met you. I'm like, oh, maybe I should check some of those places out. That's a great idea.
And there's awesome. So many of them. And like, it boggles my brain. I go in there and I see all of this really high-end clothing. Some of it's unaffordable. Don't get me wrong. Like some of it's thousands of dollars, but some of it still has tags on it and it's a couple $100.
Wow.
So you've got to pick and choose and find your sizes. I mean, there's usually only one of each in every store. So if it's a little too big, then you can get it sized down, which is easy. And sometimes if there's like a good hem on it, you can let it down or you can, you know, get it taken out. So it depends on the fabric and sometimes it's luck. But if the consignment store owner gets to know you, she can visually match you to her consignees and consigner, so that if someone brings in stuff that she knows is going to fit you, she'll call you up. So that's where I luck out as well.
Oh, I like that.
You develop relationships, right? And the secondhand economy isn't just like the local consignment stores. I've done this online as well. So Facebook buy and sell groups are huge, and they're local to you. So I go online. You got to need to look in your area.
Yeah.
So if you're in a rural area, find a buy and sell group local to your area, because then you can just meet people in person and exchange the goods for the cash. Bigger cities, it's easier. But the thing is, I find secondhand economy just as vibrant in rural BC as it is here in Toronto. And that's because there's less choice for shopping in rural areas. So people are more adamant about selling their stuff for cash.
Yeah.
So people perceive they save around $500 a year by going secondhand. And that can range on anything from clothing, kids' gears, electronics like televisions, and off-road vehicles like snowmobiles. Wow. That's really big to sell in Canada. And people will sell their goods and they earn about $800 a year just by offloading what you already have. Wow. So again, you know, my kid's stroller would have been $250. You know, I've sold some snowsuits. Some kids' shoes are huge. I can't believe like the value I get back from kids' shoes if they're not too scuffed up. So Facebook's a really great place for that. And some of the Facebook groups are specific for kids. Some are specific to high-end fashion. Some are specific to electronics. So read through the group first. Make sure it's a good match for you. And if so, you probably need to request to join, because they don't want just anyone spamming the group. They want to make sure that, you know, they want to vet you so it's a safe place, and see what other people are posting. And I find when I go to buy stuff, you need to get on there quick, because if you're first, you're going to be first in line to buy that good. People line up afterwards and say second, third, fourth. So if the sale falls through for the first person, the next person on the list gets the good. And I've even seen like auction style things happening. So I put my, and that's good for the seller, right? So I put my kids, snow pants online. I'm like, hey, anyone need a size 3T snow pant? And I said, give me your best offer. And then people just started like offering me money for these pants. And I'm like, okay, I'll take the $15. Thanks.
Nice.
And that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you sell a couple pairs of shoes, jeans, kids' snow pants, all of a sudden you have your budget for the next season's clothing with your kid. So you can kind of recycle your cash that way.
Yeah.
So it becomes not only an economic viable thing to do, but it's really ecological as well, because you're not going out and buying new stuff all the time. You're reusing stuff within your community. And I build relationships with other parents who I buy and sell with as well. And also other women. So I've resold some of the dresses I've worn. And they watch for me and they know their sizes. And when I put a dress online, they come and buy it from me in cash. So it's a really cool way to just kind of create your own little economy, because once you've done it enough, you vet who's safe and who's going to buy, who's not going to try and lowball you too badly, and you work it accordingly. So Facebook's great. Local consignment stores are great. eBay, it's kind of hit or miss for me. I found some good deals, but again, if you live in Canada, you've got to pay to have this stuff shipped here, and then you go through duty. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. But if you live or have a mailbox in the United States, there's really big consignment stores for clothing. One's called The Real Real, and there's a lot of amazing high-end stuff there, and they vet it to make sure it's authentic.
Oh, nice.
And there's one in Europe called the Vestiaire Collective. And they have a lot of stuff that you can't buy here in North America. So more European brands, access to certain things that were never available on our market. So a lot of, I guess, the Dolce & Gabbana type stuff. British designers like Victoria Beckham. You name it, it's there. So secondhand purses too, if that's your thing, and shoes. So that's basically how I kitted out my wardrobe. I just went all secondhand. And if something was too big, you take it to a tailor and get it altered. And I think that's the other secret that people, they expect everything off the rack to fit. And I don't know anyone that fits off the rack. If you're the person that fits off the rack, email me, because I want to know what you look like. But because I don't know anyone. Men get their suits to fit them, right? They go to buy a suit. It's alterations are just part of the package. And yet women don't seem to do that. But the clothing will fit so much better if you get it tailored just to fit you. So I think that's the other tip to make, a less stellar dress look amazing, is to pay the couple extra bucks and get it to fit your curves.
Absolutely.
So I think, and I think that's it. But I find with going secondhand is I can afford to buy higher quality goods for less money. And it's, I feel good because it's sustainable. When I buy a higher end good as well, it's easier to sell it later on because people want the quality fabrication and, they're willing to pay for the brand name. And that works for kids gear. It works for my clothing. It works for sports equipment. So I was a competitive cyclist. I was able to resell my bicycles. It works for that as well. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the secondhand economy. And when I go into a mall, I feel really shocked because I'm not used to seeing like 10 dresses, the same pattern all lined up on a rack. Because if you go into a consignment store, it's just one of each type. Right. So, but yeah, basically if you buy higher quality goods, it'll last longer. You'll feel better wearing it, or using it. If it's a gadget or, a bicycle, and I just feel like it's better value for my money, because I would rather, wear something that feels good and looks good than something that is more of the fast fashion or disposable garment that you see at like the fast fashion retailers. And I think a lot of women spend a lot of money on fast fashion. And, and when I go into like a Value Village, I see a lot of the fast fashion, on racks, and it's not selling because no one wants to rebuy it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge loss. You buy, and it doesn't last. Like you put it through the washing machine, even if you hang it to dry, the fabrication still warps, and I feel like I've wasted my money. So by spending a bit more on quality, I'm happy. So I think that's the secret.
That is the secret sauce for sure.
Yeah, I think so. it's like furniture, cars and trucks. I've bought and sold cars on Kijiji. I really do like Kijiji.
Yeah, me
I
too.
always say to people, if you're going to use Kijiji or Facebook, make sure you use like the messaging apps and you don't give away too much information about yourself personally,
Yeah.
because you don't want people to know too much about you.
Yeah,
And I always
exactly.
meet someone in a public place when I do stuff on Kijiji, usually at a subway station or something, just to be more safe, because you never really know,
No,
right? But,
exactly. Yeah. No, my
you
husband
know,
just bought he wanted to upgrade kind of his laptop. So it was a more powerful laptop, and he found one on Kijiji, and he met the guy at Eaton Center, and it was
yeah.
fine. And he's like, yeah, it was a bit dented, but he tested it out with the guy and made sure it all worked, and he loves it. And it was so much cheaper than buying it brand new from the Apple store. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I
yeah,
can't understand not going secondhand first. And
I
if you're
know.
stuck and you need something, then, go the first hand economy. But people seem to think, that the secondhand economy is gonna, kill the first hand economy, but it doesn't. Because if you're the person selling your television, you're looking to get the money out of your used television to buy a new one, right? Like that's
Exactly.
generally how it works. So basically, you just made a television that's perfectly usable, affordable for someone else, like me. So yeah, and I mean, you got to be careful with taxes. If you go into business buying and selling stuff, then tax becomes an issue. But if you're just a small buy and sell, drop off on my porch type deal, you're good to go. Nothing there as well.
Yeah. Have you ever
But yeah,
had I don't know if you have, but because I actually haven't tried it out, but have you ever tried out Buns where it's actually it's just a straight up trade situation? There's no money involved.
I haven't tried it yet. I have a friend who like trades like her clothing for bottles of wine. I can't make this
Amazing.
up. Yeah. So she's like, yep, sold my skirt for wine. And I'm like, okay,
I
whatever
know.
floats your boat.
I know. Yeah, it's
But
a whole
people who
different
are
world,
on Buns,
Buns.
yeah, but to me, it's kind of like Buns is kind of like the farm economy.
Yeah.
When I lived on the farm, people barter and trade goods and services. So time. So for instance, when we were plowing our field, bringing in the alfalfa for the cattle and the horses, um, we'd have the equipment, but we needed someone to drive the truck. So, the guy next door would come and drive the truck to haul the alfalfa stacked away, the stacks of alfalfa away. And then we would go over to his field and farm with him. So that's kind of like a personal Buns. You're like, well, I'll exchange 10 hours units of your work if if I can exchange that same amount of work for
Yeah.
you. So people do that, or equipment. Like if you have a certain tractor another farmer needs, then you exchange that good for something else. So maybe the farmer will say, okay, I'll give you 88 bales of hay if I can use your tractor for 3 hours. So, like this whole sharing economy has been around forever. We just didn't use social platforms to do it. We'd meet the person next door and say, hey, can I have a cup of milk?
Yeah.
Right? So basically Buns is like, hey, do you have a bottle of wine? I have a skirt. It's facilitating that conversation in a very different way. We're not as friendly with our next door neighbors as we used to be. And it's hard when you live in a big apartment complex too. So it's a really cool way to unload that skirt if you're looking for, I guess, some liquor. But yeah, but you haven't tried it.
I haven't. My husband has, and he has lots of friends. He has lots of musician friends that find it great to upgrade gear. So if you find something that people are maybe undervaluing, you'll be like, oh, I'll trade you this piece of gear for that piece of gear. And then they kind of use it to kind of like up, and eventually they can kind of start from one small piece of gear to like a really high priced piece of gear just by trading up, which is pretty crazy. It's a whole different thing going on there, but pretty neat.
Yeah, I know. It's gear, right? Well, my husband does ham radio. And so he started off with like an introductory radio, but you also need receivers and antennas. And I mean, I don't even want to tell you what it is in the backyard, like something signals. I don't know. See, I don't get it. To me, you do broadcast, right? Like he just wants to collect signals all over the world. But yeah, he started with, secondhand radio. And traded up from there. It's the same sort of deal. So I think if you have a niche hobby or interest that you do that requires equipment, secondhand economy is great for that because you can get your feet wet with entry level gear without paying, retail prices for it.
Absolutely.
And I guess the same would be the same if you have a kid who, wants to try hockey. You don't have to buy all the hockey gear new. I look at parents who go to the sports store and buy skates and sticks and hockey equipment and goalie equipment. I'm like, the secondhand kids store down the block has like goalie gear. Why don't you try it on there, right?
Yeah.
It's like 75% less. So if your kid isn't sure they're going to like the sport, you can buy it secondhand, like soccer shoes. I mean, I played soccer as a kid. Soccer is a fairly frugal sport to get involved in, but you still need cleats. Get your shin pads new because those are stinky. But, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think if you just, go on a Buns or go on Facebook or, sleuth some of the local consignment stores and ask the store owner, it's like, oh, wow, this is, your market. Do you know where I could find this? They all know each other.
Yeah.
All the consignment stores know each other and they all have their own niches and they all, frequent other people's stores and they kind of sleuth and check it out to see who's more competitive, right? So they know everyone and they know if you're not going to buy something there and they direct traffic elsewhere, that's going to come back to them, with the storekeeper, sending stuff back. So people back. So, ask.
Yeah.
I think that's something we're really shy as Canadians. We don't do. We're like, hey, I came in here looking for soccer gear or hockey gear. Where can I find that? Or I'm looking for this amp, or I need a cool radio or a new television or laptop. People know. People know, and they'll share it. And they'll help you along. And I think if you just ask the question, it's like, hey, oh man, I love your store, but I'm looking for this. Can you put me in the right direction? People want to be helpful.
Yeah.
And the same thing is like, if someone shows me something that's gorgeous, but I just can't afford it, I tell them, I'm like, this is the most gorgeous jacket I've ever seen, but it's so out of my budget. What else do you have, and you move from there. So there's no ill feelings, and maybe if they don't have anything in stock because it's a consignment store, if they get something more in their budget, you leave your number and they call you, that's another way to do it. So yeah.
Wow. How is that? You've inspired me to definitely start sleuthing online. That's for sure. And I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people listening to do the same, because I think a lot of people just don't, there's a lack of awareness. People just aren't aware. They don't know. So you are living proof that you can, buy some awesome stuff for 75% off and then sell it.
I mean, I found a nice couple and I just gave them my kids' crib for free. They came off Kijiji. They met us. It was like an IKEA crib. It cost us like $100. And I tell you, people get all ramped up about buying an expensive crib. But I'm like, the crib is the most expensive piece of furniture your kid will chew on. Yeah. Because when they start teething, they chew on the crib. So I said, there's some chew marks on this. If you like the crib, I can give it to you for free. I like you guys. And I threw in all the bedding. And I was able to offload all this stuff I no longer needed. And it felt really good because I basically free cycled it. So, I created space, helped out a nice young couple. I know. And got rid of the stuff I didn't need anymore. And that's part of the battle, right? Yeah. If you got a growing kid, they grow out of stuff. You all of a sudden have kid stuff you don't need. Secondhand economy, make it your first economy.
I love that.
And then buy my kids gear. It's frugal.
I like that also. That's awesome. Well,
find me online. Buy my stuff.
You should have that. You should have a little buy and sell section of your website. Just be like, FYI, this is what I'm, if anyone's
good at buying and selling. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for enlightening me and everybody else about the secondhand economy, something that I hope becomes more popular and more common in the next few years, because I think it's amazing. Not only is it, a kind of a financially responsible thing to do, but also environmentally friendly and, helps the economy and everything like that. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And I feel like we could probably talk for another half an hour, but let's just, but I appreciate you taking these 40 minutes chatting with me. It was fabulous as always.
My pleasure.
And that was episode 105 with Kerry Taylor. Make sure to check out her blog, squawkfox.com, or follow her on Twitter at Squawkfox. And of course, check out the show notes. I'm going to put some information about stuff that we talked about in there. All you have to do is go to jessicamorehouse.com/105. Super easy. And of course, as always, big thanks to Wealthsimple for supporting the Mo Money podcast and sponsoring this episode of the show. Thank you so much. And in case you aren't aware, Wealthsimple is the fastest growing automated investing service in Canada. Wealthsimple uses smart technology to help you create and manage a diversified investment portfolio, saving you time and money. In other words, they are one of the most popular, biggest robo-advisors in Canada. And I highly recommend them. They are awesome. And they're just a really simple way to start investing today. And you don't have to go to an office and talk to a suit to do it. And if you want to get your investments on through Wealthsimple, make sure to do it the next couple days through my affiliate link, wealthsimple.com/Jessica Morehouse, up until April 30th. So time's a ticking, guys. You can get your first $10,000 of investments with no management fees for 1 year. None for 1 year. So make sure to go to wealthsimple.com/Jessica Morehouse to take advantage of this special offer before it expires. And before I go, I've been lucky enough to get some podcast reviews. Thank you so much, guys, for giving me some reviews. All right, the first review I have is from JennyJen55 from Canada. She says, "Hi, Jessica. I absolutely love this podcast. I cannot get enough. I've been listening to all the episodes during my spare time. I love the topics covered. The questions you ask are great, and the guests you've had seriously got me thinking about the details of my own personal finance journey. Keep it up, girl." Jenny, fellow personal finance geek. Well, thank you, Jenny, for the review. I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed your shout out on this show. Another one I got from the US of A, Anurag4343 says, "I love Jessica's podcast. Simple and not filled with jargon, yet drives the point home. More power to her. More power to you, Anurag4343 from USA. Woo! And one more before I go from Colbrand Flakes from Canada. I started listening to this podcast 3 days ago, and I am hooked. Working as a value engineer in London, Ontario, my job is quite literally to save my company money, but I have been struggling with my own school and credit debt for 3 years since I graduated. Feel your pain. Feel it. After listening to this podcast and reading more about managing personal finances from people like Galvez Oxlade, I become seriously motivated to get in control of my debt. The variety and insight that Jessica and her guests discuss is eye-opening, and you are sure to learn something of value each episode. Keep up the good work, Jessica, and hopefully in 6 to 8 months after I've been successful at paying off my debt, I can come on as one of your listener series episodes." Absolutely, for real. I would love to have you on the show. And if you listening right now would like to get a special shout out from me on a future episode, it's super easy. All you have to do is leave me a review on iTunes. Takes you 2 seconds, but it will be pretty awesome once you hear your name and your review. Just saying. And that's really it from me. I am super excited. I'm taking a much needed vacation this weekend. Me and the HB are taking a few days to literally unplug. We're going to try not to look at any of our devices and just like play cards, drink some wine, watch some movies, and chillax. So I hope you have some plans to do the same soon, because you're awesome and you deserve it. All right. I will see you back here next Wednesday.